some general information. Everyone will be on mute, but you can type in questions, and I will answer all of them, most likely closer to the end, as hopefully we will get through most of the information or questions you have during the webinar. And then if you have any questions outside of kind of the scope of the reporting and data collection, prefer to go ahead and just email me those questions, and I will try to get back to you on that as soon as I can. I'll be the only one here today. Atish and Sarah are both in a training this week out of the office. Just for a heads up for the webinar program, on your screen, the orange arrow at the top right there can be made to minimize or maximize the sidebar. And if you have it, in order to type questions, you have to keep that open. If you have any technical problems or the webinar stops working, the best move is to just go ahead and log off and try logging back on. And same for the phone. If you have any problems, just hang up, try calling back in. It's the best way around the webinar issues. Hopefully this will be well under an hour. Hopefully to get through the slides and be able to spend time trying to answer the questions you may have. All right, I think it looks like we have about everyone we were expecting, so I'll go ahead and get started. So as long anticipated, we are going to be having our progress reports submitted online. I have distributed the template for those reports to everyone. If you have not received those or need me to resend that information, go ahead and send me an email about that, and I will follow up with you. The online data collection will follow essentially the same template as the paper or the Word version I provided. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started and talk about what the OilDC program actually is. So first, we're going to go over OilDC in general, how it's used. Some of you may be familiar. It's used for programs in the past, especially with the GATES program, with which I believe some states have access for submitting of the SF425s. So hopefully some people will be familiar. We'll kind of go over what to expect in the submitting process and how you get your reports into us, and then go over the resources and training that the OilDC program offers. They have great contractors and help support, so hopefully this process will go smoothly. I don't know about the first time around, but as we get going, I think this will be a great resource to have versus everyone submitting paper individually. So the OilDC system allows all grantees to submit their information online, which is a huge help on the paper trail and gives us opportunities to be able to sort and access the data in a single format. So all of our abstinence grantees will be required to submit this process online, which hopefully will help, like I said, streamline the process and opens up a resource with some valuable technical assistance for the reporting through the OilDC and the contractors. As I mentioned in the email yesterday, the content of the document that I gave to help guide you through the process references PrEP exclusively, not abstinence and PrEP. That's due to the fact that the TA contract funding for the pregnancy prevention programs exclusively was legislated to fund PrEP, so we're kind of piggybacking on the resources they're developing. But functionally, all the information and how you go about accessing OilDC is the same. The drop-down windows for you will just include AEGP versus PrEP. So the OilDC not only allows you to submit all of our data, all of the data from your states, but then allows us to process and file that information in an easy-to-access way that allows us to be able to give reports to Congress and try to show that the programs, the abstinence programs, that is serving the purpose we want, which is reducing teen pregnancies and STIs in the communities. So here's the URL for the site, which should also be in the the guidance document we provided, and I will email the link out to everyone following this as well. At this time, well, we'll get to the login information a little bit here. So as I said, use the guidance that was provided in this PowerPoint as a resource. The guidance goes really great step-by-step process for how to utilize the website. So here's the information about ID and password. It was my understanding from the contractor that through Gates, many of the state health departments already have a password and user ID from submitting the SF425s. I've already gotten feedback from some grantees that is not the case, so that's no problem. We will be able to distribute new IDs and passwords next week. I just ask that all states, if you're unsure, maybe check with your grants office or someone in the health department who may have done the filing for the SF425 and see if your state already has a login and a password. And if not, email me and we will set you up with a new username and password next week. This slide further describes the kind of system that will initially give you a username, then a password, and you, like with most systems, you log on, they ask you to change the password, pretty standard. Again, there's just describing how when you first get a password, they'll ask you to change it. So that will kind of be things we'll deal with on an individual basis when we're working on the passwords next week. But just like any software package, they have a forgot the password link, and it should take you back to the TA providers for the online data collection website who can walk you through the process. Again, here's what the initial login screenshot will look like. So some of you may be familiar with this from using Gates, others may not. And then once you're, obviously, if you go logged in the first time, you would go to change the password and change your question to personalize it to you. Now your screen will look a little different than the one here shown. You most likely only have Gates and OilDC as your two selections within the Select application menu. But we'll get to that shortly. So yes, I said, generally we're just using this program to log in to access the OilDC program. Certainly if the OilDC option is not listed when you log in, please contact us immediately. We'll try to get that access up, but it should be ready to go for all the abstinence grantees. And then once you're within OilDC, you want to click on the report form entry, which is really the main resource you'll be using almost exclusively through OilDC unless you have any complications. So that first tab will be where you head most of the time. All right, now we're going to go over how you access and submit the reporting forms. So here's an example of one of the drop-downs that just says prep. But for us, it'll be essentially the same on the program name. Your drop-down options will include AEGP, grantee name. You select your state and grantee number, and then it's obviously the PPR, which is what we're here talking about for submit. And then select enter. And then for the reporting period, obviously we are all dealing with the first reporting cycle. In future reporting periods, there will be obviously several options because it will continue to show the past, but just make sure you click the right timeline for what we're reporting for. And then you go down to the Select Action tab, and you want to always click New, Edit, or Revise a Report, which is how you get in to change, revise, or modify any of your reports. Any of the links at the top of the OilDC unit can help you navigate paths to and from the previous screens. OilDC is one of those type of online software packages that the back function doesn't really work on, so you need to navigate through those top options when you're going back and forth through the reporting sections. When you're entering, the reporting sections include entering a new report, or you can enter a report that has been saved to correct errors or revise before submitting if you have any new information, and we'll kind of go into how you go back and forth between editing, revising as we move along here. So the AEGP PPR, hopefully as many of you have viewed, has 4 large sections titled A through D, some subsections. Each section will be submitted separately, and as the screenshot shows here, I'll move on to the next one. First you click to edit a section, say like the cover page where you put your information in, and then you click Go, and then here's the screenshot, which if you looked at the template, the screenshot looks almost the same as the template we submitted. So you're basically just plugging in the information that hopefully you already have on file for each section. And again, there's just another screenshot of what the report's information has asked for. It's virtually similar to what the template we provided for you. And the guidance document we provided has these same steps that will help you walk through what you're looking at on the screen to make sure you're on the same page for how you're submitting the information. Most of the information you could fit in the allowed space in on the website, but if not, you can attach additional files. Once data is entered and saved for each section, the entire form must be validated from the Reports section screen. Now, validate checks for form and mathematical errors. If there are no errors, then the form will be indicated as saved, and then from that point you could then certify the information. If there are any problems, it will say save with errors, and then you have to go in yourself and correct those errors. After report events successfully saved and validated, a person with appropriate roles can then certify. So with each of you only getting, you'd say having one login, there will only be one person, or whoever's logging in under that username will be able to certify. Certifying involves kind of giving a digital signature from kind of that person of saying that this information is all valid from grantees. Here's where you see on the cover page, there's the signature of their authorized certifying official at the bottom. And all you do there is click, and that's your electronic signature. This is kind of an overview of the way the process goes here. First, you're going to submit, or first you save. It's kind of a bottom-up on this screen. So you save the information initially. Then you go to validate it to make sure everything is mathematically, grammatically correct. Then after that's cleared, you certify by the certifying officers providing electronic signature. And at that point, the information is submitted to our office, and you have no longer have editing access to the material. So you want to make sure that that you do not certify until everything is clarified as your final information. If in the event that you do submit or certify and it's submitted to us and you realize there were errors and you want to change them before we review the information, simply let us know via email, and we can return it to you, and then you can change the information and recertify. So here's kind of going back over the certification process. You need to certify each of the sections of the reporting, and once you submit button, that, like I said, that goes. The information is with us, and you can no longer edit it without us sending it back to you. But you do have the option to uncertify before submitting if you need any of the certified information. Again, this is just kind of an overview of what the process will look like after submitting. It will just say submitted, and then it's in our hands to review, and then we will give you an email notification either if it's if we have no problems and we accepted the report, or if we have any issues, we'll return it to you with the suggestions on what we need modified. So this is fairly important, even though it seems kind of trivial. At the end of each use, you need to actually physically hit end OilDC versus just Xing out of the website. For some reason, the system will lock you out for 30 minutes if you do not actually hit end OilDC and you cannot log in. So if you by chance, close your tabs on your web browser or something, you will not be able to re-access the information. And once they lock you out. OilDC, if you leave it open for a long period of time, will also ask you to, or give you a warning if you don't use the system for more than 30 minutes while open. they'll log you out as well. So just make sure when you're closing the browser, hit End OilDC first if you plan on going back in the near future to work on it. As far as resources go, as I said, the contracting TA providers for this web platform are really good. They provide a lot of information for the users as far as questions, and people have been using this for years, so there's a large database of kind of frequently asked questions or help where you can search keywords, and that should be able to answer quite a few of your issues that may come up. And if not, there's also, if you have a new question or you don't think the answers are there, there's also the ability to search by the answers themselves or go through and actually look at various help sheets for submitting different information, including the information similar to PPR. So on this screen you could see that the old abstinence program, the community-based abstinence education, was one of the grantees that used to submit, and their reporting templates are very similar to ours. So say, for example, their form instructions could be a helpful, or CBA Introduction to OilDC would both be helpful resources if you're having any questions, because their PPR template was very similar to the one we used. And again, if neither in the frequently asked questions or the answer search you find what you need, you could the contractors will get back to you with a solution. And then here's the direct email access. If you don't go through OilDC, you can use this email to ask any questions about the system to the support center. That was helpful. Again, if you did not have a login or password, please email me and I'll get one to your state next week. Hopefully this presentation and the subsequent guidance that I provided provides a really good step-by-step way for you to utilize OilDC. I'm happy to take any questions now. If you guys have questions, please send them my way. All right, looks like we have some questions coming in. All right, like I said, if anyone has any questions, please send them in and I'll go through one at a time, try to answer all the ones I can. I'll go ahead and start with the first question from Lawrence Piper asking, will grantees be able to print and retain copies of reports from the online system? I'm not sure, but if you can, I do not think you can print and retain copies, but I will check with OilDC on that issue and send that out. And kind of if we have common sources of questions, I'll go ahead and try to send out one response to everyone with the answers, and that'll check. And I do not think you can print and retain documents. I think they are retained by us and only can be in the system, but I will verify that for you. Next question from Mary Jo Chippendale is, will this be archived for future reference or for staff who aren't able to attend? Yes, the webinar is being recorded and it will be put on the FISBE website next week. Does anyone have any other questions at this time? I'll wait for a minute or two to see if anyone wants to type in questions. It's kind of a lot of info, but it's pretty streamlined and easy to use once you get going in OilDC. All right, we have a few more questions coming in. All right. Sandy Powell is asking what are the requirements for the narrative reporting. The funding opportunity announcement directions are still the guiding source of information for how to submit the narrative reporting. In this first reporting cycle, we realized there will probably be kind of not that much information necessarily to provide, considering a lot of programs didn't even start until this fall. But I'd utilize the instructions and the and the funding opportunity announcement that pertain to the narrative reporting. Dorothy Hastings asks, does each state have only one gate password, or will each user have one? Also, as a person who submits state's authorized representative, I believe that's what Dorothy's asking. Each state will only have one username and password. That is correct. That's a decision to try to keep all the information being streamlined through the state entity rather than having sub-grantees and various people submitting potentially conflicting data. The person who certifies can be the contact person. It does not have to be the authorized representative who certifies that information. Do we have any other questions from grantees at this time about the data collection?
Hi, Griffin. This is Jamie. There was one question that came through on the chat box.
Okay.
And it actually asked how many persons can be in the system and submit.
Okay. That is a question that we are still asking OilDC as well. We were curious of that. If there was a singular login, could multiple users utilize it? And we think that's possible, but we haven't gotten confirmation on that. So I'll check that and provide that feedback to everyone as well. All right. Well, I guess one last call. Or any other questions? If not, I assume I'll be fielding some from emails, and we'll, as I said, we'll get on the login and password distribution as soon as we can next week. And as you begin to start reporting, I welcome anyone to go ahead and give me a call or shoot me an email if you're having any trouble. And if it's trouble more speaking to the PPR, what content you're looking for, go ahead and contact me. If it's trouble about your system submission, go ahead and contact the people through OilDC. Okay, next question is from Penny McGrew, and she's asking if AEGP and PrEP recipients will have the same username and password. And the answer is that is yes. If you are an entity that is overseeing both programs, you'll have one username and password for those, and you will just then have the drop-downs when you select choose a program. Both options will be available, and then once you're within that, it'll take you to the separate reporting period or reporting documents. All right, no other questions. Hopefully this will streamline the process and make it easier for everyone. And like I said, feel free to call me and contact me in the coming weeks as you work on your reporting. I'm sure we'll have complications as we, I myself as a project officer, this might be my first time going through PPR submissions through OilDC as well. So we'll all be learning, and hopefully this will be a positive way to utilize our data and make it available for Congress and the public to see that our programs are making a difference. So thank you for participating, and I look forward to talking to most of you soon.